Here in the International District of Seattle sits the historic Panama Hotel. The hotel was built in the early 1900s. This spot was quickly a focal point for the Japanese community because it had baths, communal baths like they had had in Japan.
Interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air, President Roosevelt has just announced.
On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese surprise attacked Pearl Harbor and devastated most of our fleet. The President and the entire Congress was in total disarray as to what to do next.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire.
Morning, everyone. Afternoon, sorry. Thanks for joining us all on such short notice. I'm Communications Director Brianna Aho. Just a heads up for you guys before we get started. Normally, the governor's happy to take as many questions as you have, but schedule's a little tight today, so we're going to have to keep it limited. He's going to share some reaction, take some questions, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. So thank you so much, with Governor Bob Ferguson.
Thanks, Brianna. Thanks, everyone, for being here. As Brianna said, on short notice, we appreciate that. I'll keep my remarks relatively short so I can get to as many questions as possible. As you all know, of course, the Senate put out its proposal for the millionaire's tax today. I'm going to start by saying that I appreciate the ongoing dialogue with House and Senate Democratic leaders that we've been enjoying for quite some time now. We agree on many key and important points. We agree, for example, that our tax system is upside down. Washington ranks near the bottom for fairness and equality in our tax system. What does that mean? Working families pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes than the wealthiest Washingtonians. That's been magnified in recent times with the tax breaks by the Republican-controlled Congress for the wealthiest Americans. I also agree with many legislators who want to devote some of this revenue toward investments in our K-12 education system to bolster Washington students' access to a world-class education. So there is much that we agree on, and the Senate's proposal is a good start, but we still have a long way to go. When I announced my support for millionaire's tax back in December, right here, many of you were here for that conversation, I said a significant percentage of the revenue must go directly back into the pockets of Washingtonians. I reinforced that message in my State of the State address a few weeks ago, in which I said a significant percentage of these revenues must go back into the pocket of Washingtonians. The current proposal is not close to achieving that important objective. I do see three things in that proposal that do put dollars right back in the pockets of Washingtonians, exactly the kind of things that I'm looking to see. So, for example, for the Working Families Tax Credit, I'll talk more about that in a moment, and detail exactly what that is for those who are viewing. But they eliminate the age limitation for that, which costs about $44 million. That's good, and I support that. They also provide for a sales tax exemption for hygiene products. I support that as well. That costs about $76 million. By the way, these are annual numbers once the program is up and fully running. I want to be clear about that. They also have tax breaks for small business owners that totals about $104 million each year. The total for those three proposals, those are the three proposals they have that go directly back in the pockets of Washingtonians. That is new dollars back in the pockets of Washingtonians. That totals about $230 million, if my math is right, or about 7% of the total revenue that we'd be receiving. So I want to be specific once again about the types of things we must do with a significant percentage of this revenue from the millionaire's tax in terms of going directly back in the pockets of Washingtonians. I mentioned the Working Families Tax Credit a few moments ago. It's a wonderful program, and I deeply appreciate the legislature in adopting this some time ago. It sends a check, a rebate of between $300 and $1,300, literally back in the pockets of Washingtonians and their families. It's a great program, but it doesn't reach many working families. And I've said publicly that we need to expand eligibility for and increase the amount of the Working Families Tax Credit. I've said that multiple times. The Working Families Tax Credit is an important program, but the eligibility is too narrow right now. Too many working families don't qualify, and we need to improve that. We need to expand the eligibility for more working families so they qualify, and we need to expand that significantly. I'll have more to say about this in the coming days as well. Additionally, another area I've emphasized is our small business owners also need tax relief. Small businesses power our economy, create jobs, and are key to our communities. I propose devoting $1 billion in tax relief to our small business owners. I understand the Senate proposal is smaller, devotes about $104 million in tax relief. So we have some negotiating to do, and I understand that. But I appreciate them including a tax break for small business owners. It's just my opinion that it's going to need to be, it's not my opinion, it will need to be much higher. I've also mentioned eliminating the sales tax on some essential items, which is why I appreciated the Senate proposal that eliminates sales tax for all hygiene products. I support that. But I also support eliminating the sales tax for products like baby diapers and other products that are commonly used by many Washingtonians. Diapers, as one example, are obviously essential for many Washingtonians. There's a national survey that's been quoted many times that says 28% of parents reported they skipped meals in order to afford diapers. 1 in 4 parents reported having to miss work or school because they did not have enough diapers to drop their child at daycare. We need to make life more affordable for more Washington families, and exempting the sales tax for diapers and other baby products is a good example of doing that. Those with fewer resources must currently spend a large share of their income on these essential items, meaning that more of their resources are taxed. Exempting them from sales tax helps make our state's tax system more fair. So in conclusion, I remain confident that we'll get where we need to be. There's still plenty of time left in this legislative session. And I, again, want to emphasize that I appreciate this first proposal by the Senate Democrats. We're going to continue talking. That's going to keep going on. I have no doubt about that. But as I wrap up, I want to be clear that as governor, my focus will be that we are listening and hearing the voices of many, many Washingtonians who are struggling right now and having a lack of affordability in our state. And we need to address that head on and to hear those voices and make sure we are putting a significantly bigger percentage of the dollars from the revenue from the millionaire's tax back into the pocket of those Washingtonians. Again, I appreciate you guys understanding it's a little bit limited time here, but I'll just go around and take any questions that folks have. Yes?
Governor, 2 questions. Both versions of the bill include a necessity clause. Is that something you would support including in the final version of the bill you sign? And then also both tax proposals include a 5% carve-out for public defender costs. Is that something you support? And if so, do you think that 5% allocation goes far enough?
So thanks for, so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay.
Thanks for those questions. I think it's too soon for me to sort of stake out a public position on those very specific details. I'm definitely aware of those. As I said, we've been having a lot of conversation. That's me directly with House and Senate leadership. That's my team, obviously having many conversations directly with staff as well. So I think those are, I guess what I'd say is I'm aware of those, have some thoughts, but want to make sure that that we're having those conversations before I'm taking a public position on it. Thanks. Yeah.
2 questions for you, Governor.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the percentage of the revenue now that being voted to tax relief is inadequate. What's a number? What's a rough threshold you're trying to get to? I mean,
Right.
You're talking 20%. You're talking 50%, 75%. Like, how far do you want to go in terms of tax relief?
It's got to be a lot more. And so, look, we've got negotiating going on, and you all understand how that works, right? And I try to be thoughtful about, how many lines in the sand I put out there publicly, right? I try to be thoughtful about that. Once I do put those out there, I'm sticking to it. And so, but what I would say is the 7% that we see here is not close. I've communicated that in conversations. I've communicated that publicly. And I think we are able to craft this proposal in a way that allows us to make a much more significant investment back into the pocketbooks of Washingtonians, small business owners, and at the same time addressing lots of other important issues that we have that I share the concerns of legislators. Hey, K through 12 education, right, public health. There's lots of things out there. So I think given the amount of the revenue that comes in from millionaires tax, I think we can do both things. But I think it's important that we do both things. And so right now I'm not going to put out a specific percentage. I appreciate the question. But for right now, we'll continue those conversations directly with leaders. Yeah.
And then a more detailed question, the 0.5% surcharge on large businesses, the proposal would roll back. Do you support rolling back that tax surcharge?
That's the one-time proposal they have. It lasts like a year or two, I think, at the front end of the revenue coming in, correct?
So it's a tax surcharge on companies earning over $250 million a year. The legislature would end that tax surcharge a year early.
A year early, yes. And so that I'm definitely aware of that, and we're having good conversations there. And I think that that's the type of thing that makes sense to me. I would say that. So I would say that makes sense to me. We're still in conversations, but we've talked about it. That makes sense to me. I obviously, as you might imagine, right, there's a lot of information, a lot of details. I've had conversations with the business community, with leadership. It makes sense to me. I want to hear a little more about it, but I'd say at this point it makes sense to me. But that is like the sort of the one-time thing that scales that back, and so that is something that does make sense, yeah.
Ferguson said this morning that he was a little surprised with your statement because he said as recently as last night you guys were discussing and thought you were all kind of on the same page.
Yeah, I've been a little surprised by some of the stuff they have in there as well, so that works both ways. I don't think there's any hard feelings about that. That's the way these things go. This is a big, complex proposal, right? There's lots of details in there. So I understand that, hey, as we get information, sometimes not every detail is there. I understand that. But the main thing is we're talking directly. Our teams are talking directly. So I recognize that sometimes it's a story, they're not quite on the same page. I get that. But, what I would really emphasize is I think our conversations are very productive. And are there some surprises for me in this? Of course. It's not a big deal. That's just the way these things work, right? And so I'm not surprised Joe said that, and that Representative Fitzgibbon said that, and appreciate that. But I don't view that as a big deal. It's the nature of these things, and we're talking virtually every single day about this. So I think the key thing is, hey, just making sure we have our numbers aligned. There's a lot of competing ideas. It's going to the House now. It's clear they're going to have their own perspective about this. And so that's why I felt it made sense at this stage, now that there's a proposal out there that I articulate to the people, and obviously to the legislature. We're having private conversations, but articulate to the people what my priorities are.
Governor.
Yes.
Considering the announced retirements on the state Supreme Court, have you discussed the prospect of the High Court ruling on a likely challenge to the millionaire's tax, should it pass this session, with potential candidates or nominees to the court, or even revisiting the ruling on an income tax in the state?
So do you mind just repeating that? I just wasn't sure I quite tracked, and my apologies. Just make sure I heard it right.
Have you discussed a possible challenge to the millionaire's tax on the state Supreme Court, should it pass this session, with potential
So let me just stop there. So to make sure, maybe I heard like two questions. So on that, obviously we're aware that, and I'm happy to hear the rest of the question, but I just want to break it down if that's okay. Obviously aware, and I've said many times that, hey, if this proposal passes the legislature, two more things are sure to happen. There will be a court challenge, and there will be a vote of the people on whether they think this is the right thing for them or not. And so, yes, of course, there have been some conversations around, hey, this potentially getting to the state Supreme Court. Of course, there have been conversations along those lines. And so I didn't mean to interrupt you, but what was the second half of your question?
Or about the prospect of the High Court in the process, should there be a challenge on that? Revisiting the ruling on the constitutionality of an income tax at large.
Well, that'll be up to the court, obviously, right? And so we'll see how that goes, if and when it gets to that point. But obviously there are some conversations. Just my focus, though, to be perfectly clear, right, is on the legislation. That's my job, is to focus on this legislation and get to a place where I can sign it.
Governor, there's been a lot of small businesses who have been very happy with the Seahawks making it as far as they have because it's great for business.
Agreed.
And it's a sports question, so I had to consult some sports reporters this morning, but there is some angst about the free agency and how this could impact free agency and good players coming to Seattle, whether it's football or baseball, and kind of having a Dwayne Wade to Miami sort of situation where the team doesn't do as well and business suffers as a result. So how concerned are you about that, given there is history of players moving from less tax-friendly states to more tax-friendly states?
Sure. So I've not seen that specifically, Brandy. Happy to take a look at it. Aware generally of that issue, I'd say. I think what I'd say is that, most states have an income tax. And so Football players still play in states where there is an income tax. But that said, I think what I would say is that from my standpoint, and I think this is true for all of us who are working on this, by the way, is that we're trying to be thoughtful about what's the amount and who's paying it, what are the impacts of that. I had a meeting yesterday with folks in the business community to talk about that. So we're certainly aware of that. And so we're going to just have to try and structure this in a way that makes the most sense, that is the most fair to address the challenges we're facing, and I'll check more into that as well. Maybe time for one more? Yeah.
What ideas are you pitching with regard to lowering the costs on, you're increasing affordability in Washington State? You mentioned working families tax credit, sales tax exemptions. More of those, more of the same that's already in there, or do you have other ideas?
So thanks for asking that. So I'd say a couple things. So number one, and I've emphasized this many times in conversations, I welcome other ideas that folks have on the best way to put dollars back in the pockets of Washingtonians. What strikes me as a couple of things that are extremely important is we need to have the largest tax break for small business owners in state history. Full stop, got to happen. So again, I appreciate the initial step that they've made here, but we're a ways away from where I started off. I have some experience in negotiating things in life, and so I understand I'm not going to get exactly what I want on that, maybe to the tune of $1 billion, but it's certainly going to be much higher. Crafting, that's going to be important. That's going to have a huge impact for small business owners all across our state. Number two, on the working families tax credit, I appreciate they've eliminated the age restriction, but it does not increase the amount that folks receive or increase the eligibility, right? And so, I'll be having more to say about this. You'll probably see me having another press conference, probably with folks who are working families, right, as examples of folks who don't qualify for that, but who certainly meet any definition of a working family in our state, to say we need to meet those folks, right? And so we're running numbers on those ideas as well. The idea of sales tax exemptions for additional products. I've looked at ideas of, hey, for clothing that's less than $100, for example, right? Things that most, if not all, Washingtonians need to purchase in their life. Those things are especially regressive, right, for folks, Washingtonians, who are paying that sales tax. So I'm open to other ideas as well. I want to be perfectly clear about that. I don't pretend to have all the answers on this. Had a conversation earlier here with some folks where I invited their feedback on it as well. And the good news is we have time, I think, to get to that place. It's a challenge. It's a short session. You all know that. So it's a challenge for something this big and this complex. But I think what I'm seeing as I wrap up is I see a lot of collaboration. I appreciate that. I see a lot of good ideas. I appreciate that. I know we have a lot of competing things to balance. But my North Star in this conversation, what my focus is going to be in this conversation in the coming weeks, is making life more affordable for Washingtonians all across our state. That's what I hear when I travel the entire state as a statewide elected official, and that is something that I feel very strongly that we need to deliver on in this proposal. Thanks, everybody, so much. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great day. Go Hawks.
Right in front of you.